Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So you've already seen part one where we removed the tire from a bead lock. This is part two. We're gonna get that wheel back inside of that tire, get that bead ring back mounted, make sure that the tire's balanced. I'm gonna show you guys all that. There's also a few different methods to get a wheel, a bead lock wheel, back inside of a tire. I'm not quite sure which one's gonna be best for this Yokohama, but we're gonna figure that out. So stay tuned, check it out. Absolute first thing that you need to know about mounting a tire on any wheel, but especially on a bead lock, is where the lightest and where the heaviest part of the tire is going to be located. Now, when manufacturers make tires, just because of the manufacturing process and the density of the rubber and the way they put them together, every single tire that's ever created will have a spot in it when you're talking about its circumference. It will have a spot that's a little bit lighter than the rest of the tire where it's unbalanced, and it'll have a spot that's going to be the heaviest part of that tire. They mark those spots with dots. Now, the dot will be on your sidewall. Sometimes it's a little further away from the bead. Sometimes it's really close to the bead. In the case of this particular Yokohama, my dots are actually very, very close to the bead. I have one down here and there's another one at the bottom. Now, they're two different colors. One's gonna be red, that's the heaviest spot in the tire, and one's gonna be yellow, that's the lightest spot in the tire. What you wanna make sure you do is align the yellow spot, the lightest spot in the tire, with the heaviest spot in the wheel. Now, the way you're able to sit there and determine what the heaviest spot in the wheel would be is typically where the valve stem is located. So if you're installing bead locks yourself in your garage and you want to try to make sure that you get the best ride possible driving down the street, you're going to want to make sure that that yellow dot is perfectly or as close to perfectly lined up with the valve stem as you can get it. So the first method, and one I've used a lot with particular tires that have a lighter sidewall, a thinner sidewall that are a smaller ply, is going to be to basically lay the tire, as you just saw me do, on top of the wheel. Now, if we take a closer look, you're going to see that yellow dot on the sidewall that I was just talking about before, lined up with my valve stem down there, okay? That is the lightest spot in the tire with the heaviest spot in the wheel. Helps make it a little bit more balanced. But here's the catch to this particular way of mounting a tire, okay? You want to get this inner bead, okay, over the outside edge of the tire. Then we can worry about mounting the outer bead. But the way you do that is you actually want to align the bottom of the tire almost at the edge of where the lip is, where the bead is going to sit, right? You can kind of see that there's like a gap here, but look over here, there's no gap, okay? You want to do that so that you can basically back up, run over, and jump on the tire. Now, I know that sounds kind of crazy, but you need weight to force that rim, that outer bead, over the lip of the tire. And what usually you're gonna do is you're gonna kind of back up, run, jump up in the air. Definitely make sure you have good shoes on. Don't hurt yourself, okay? And land on basically the 3 and the 9 o'clock position on the tire. And when you do that, if it's lubed up with the soapy water, as you just saw me spray, a lot of the time you can get that bead to pop over the outside edge of the tire. Now, tire shops use machines and things to do this, but you got to remember, on a bead lock, because that outer bead, that outer edge is not meant to retain the bead of the tire without a bead ring, it's not all that difficult to get the tire to fall over that bead surface, okay? That is one way of doing it. You're not going to see me jump on it because I just hurt my foot. We're going to move on to another way of doing it. Guys, I just want to take a quick second, say thanks for watching. Make sure that you guys subscribe to the channel to show your support. YouTube really cares about the amount of subscribers you have. So if you like what we're doing, and you like what the goal of the channel is, right? To give back to you guys, wheeling content, giveaways, future vehicle giveaways. definitely subscribe to show your support so we can keep it moving in that direction.
Okay, you're gonna wanna soap up the bead of the tire. You're gonna wanna soap up the bead on the wheel where the bead ring would go. And then you're gonna hold the inside bead of the wheel, lift it above your head, and kind of do a controlled drop using the weight of the wheel to force it through the bead on the tire.
So super easy way to get a wheel inside of a tire. I've done the jumping method before. It's fairly easy, but if you don't weigh that much, you know, again, I'm over 6 feet tall, I'm just over 200 pounds. If you're 110 pounds, you're a female, it's not gonna be the way you're gonna wanna do it. But this way was very, very, very simple, as you just saw. Now, we're gonna go back to that yellow dot, which happens at this point to be on the bottom of my tire, and line it up with the valve stem. The valve stem is close, okay? But I'd like it to be a little closer. Now is the time to adjust that. Then we're gonna talk about how we balance this tire, okay? So I'm basically just gonna grab the wheel because it's just kind of sitting in here. We're gonna grab the wheel and just kind of rotate it a little bit so that it's close. Now, part one of this video series, you saw me take the balance beads out of the inside of the tire with a dedicated shop vac. The reason, real quick, that it has to be dedicated is because if you have a shop vac that you use for cleaning up, you know, yard waste, your garage floor, things like that, the inside of it never really gets perfectly clean ever again. And these balance beads are so tiny. I'll show you how big they are in just a second. You're gonna wanna make sure that the inside of this bucket here for this vacuum stays clean. Now, the problem with after you vacuum them out is static electricity. They get all charged up, and it's very difficult to actually get them out of the container and back into the tire. Before we get to that, guys, check out the balance bead video. Lots of people have problems with balance beads because they don't do it properly. If you do it properly, as I mentioned in this video, you definitely won't have any problems with balance beads. Definitely go and check it out. All right, so that is my fingertip, and I don't even know how many I got there. I got 4 balance beads, okay, on my fingertip. Balance beads are super small ceramic beads. They do not hold moisture. So any of the water, any of the soapy water that you had sprayed on that wheel and tire to get it seated, if it wound up inside the tire, you don't have to worry about it. It'll be just fine. It'll dry, and if it doesn't dry immediately, they will not hold moisture. Now, to make it easier, okay, I always take the balance beads and a little bit of static guard, right? And I just give it a quick spray in there just to make sure that there's no static electricity in the balance beads. These balance beads, like I said, I took them out of the tire because I had already measured the amount. Now, the amount that you use for your tire depends on tire size. Again, I talk about all of that in the other video. But in this case, we're just basically gonna take these beads and we are just going to slowly pour them right inside of the wheel, right inside the tire. Okay, we're gonna try to tap it. See, and we still didn't even get all of them out there because, again, a little static electricity. So, maybe a little bit more static guard, maybe get in there with your hand, wipe them out, make sure you get as many of them back inside the tire as you can. If a few of them wind up on the ground, it's really not that big of a deal. They're so tiny, they don't weigh a whole lot individually. So again, if you drop a few of them, it's really not that big of a deal. All right, guys. Now that the balance beads are back inside the wheel, you saw in the first part of the video how I basically used a spackle bucket, okay, with the wheel on top of it. Well, we're gonna do the same thing, okay, to kind of have the tire and the wheel off the ground. But this time we're gonna make sure that the spackle bucket is down in there. I have a towel over it so it doesn't scratch my wheel. I put the back side of the wheel on top of the spackle bucket, and then you set the tire down. Now, this is the important part. You're gonna basically take the bead of the tire, okay, all the way around it, and you want it to very evenly sit up against this surface edge right here, okay? Now, if you have a tire that's got a pretty thin sidewall, like a Milestar Patagonia or something like that, it's a lighter ply tire, it's gonna be much easier to do this. I've seen people work the edge around with their hand. I've seen people work the edge around and then hit it with like a dead blow rubber mallet on the sidewall of the tire to help move it into position. That did not work for me on this tire when I originally had mounted them. So what I wound up doing was using a flat little pry bar tool. All right, as you can see here, this is what that pry bar tool looks like. And basically, I just put it between the bead of the tire and that edge of the wheel and kind of work it around while pushing down with my hand to make sure that the bead of the tire, you can see it just kind of drop there. Continue to do that, work my way all the way around the wheel until the bead of the tire is where I want it, and we move on to the next. All right, guys, so now that the tire is on the outer bead of the wheel, it's time to put these spacers back on. You saw in part one how thick the bead was on this tire, so these spacers are crucial, okay? That basically stops the bead ring from deforming and kind of becoming a bowl shape as you tighten them down with those 32 bolts. So these are just gonna go all the way around the tire. We're gonna line them up, and then we're gonna lay the bead ring on top of there all nicey nice and start that process.
All right, after the spacers are on, all lined up, laid nice and flat, and the holes are lined up, we're gonna very carefully center that bead ring and just use a couple of bolts to start.
You are, when you put the bead ring on, gonna wanna start with 4 bolts, okay? I basically pick a spot on the wheel, so I pick where it actually says Raceline. It's kind of machined into the wheel. I put a bolt there. I'm gonna use that as my starting point for the installation of the bead ring. I'm gonna put one in there, I'm gonna put it in nice and loose. Let's call that 12 o'clock. I'm gonna put one at 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock. Now, once those are in there nice and loose, but I've turned a couple of threads, I'm gonna make sure that this bead ring is perfectly centered. If you get down way in here, it might be kind of hard to see with the lighting, there's actually a mold line in the rubber, okay, that's right around the edge of this that I can barely see. So I'm gonna make sure that that mold line on my sidewall is the same distance away all the way around this bead ring, and that's gonna make sure that this bead ring is perfectly centered. Once it is, I'm gonna put a little anti-seize on every single one of the bolts. I'm gonna start threading them in first by hand, and then we'll get started with the torquing sequence. Beadlocks, depending upon the brand or the manufacturer, all have a different torque specification. Now, the torque specification on a Raceline is pretty low. It's only about 16 pound-feet. So I'm gonna be very, very cautious with this drill just to make sure that I don't over-torque them. And I just to save me a little time. We'll actually get to torquing them later, but for right now, we're just gonna kind of move around the wheel. But here's the catch. As you're moving around the wheel, you want to start with 12 o'clock, right? Then go to 6 o'clock, then go to 9 o'clock, then go to, or I'm sorry, 3 o'clock, then go to 9 o'clock, all right? And then what you want to do is do that again, but we're going to go 1 to the right of everything, okay? So we're going to go back to 12, we're going to go 1 to the right. Right, back to 6, 1 to the right. Back to 3, 1 to the right. Back to 9, 1 to the right. You want to very lightly work your way all around the tire until all of them are screwed in a little bit more. Then we'll get to torquing. But with that said, I'm going to start torquing, and I'm going to start torquing in the same fashion. 12, 6, 3, 9, 1 to the right, all the way around. Keep doing it until you have them all torqued, okay? My first step, I'm gonna torque them all at 15 pound-feet, which is a little low. Then I'm gonna crank it up to 17. I'm gonna torque them all in that fashion a second time, okay? And then I'm gonna leave it at 17 and do every single one of them again, okay? Because you're compressing a piece of rubber, the problem is that first one, on that final turn, might be at 17, but by the time I torque down all the rest of them, now the rubber is squeezed everywhere else on the tire, and that first bolt is no longer going to be at 17. Guys, this is a very time-consuming process to do it right, which is why it's in your best interest with a beadlock to do it at home, okay? It is not too difficult. Just sit down, throw a TV on, throw on some music, get it done right. You bring it to a shop, they're going to charge you a lot of money because of the labor involved, and you hope that they do it right. Okay, after that outer bead ring and you've done it all those times that I just mentioned, the inner bead still hasn't been mounted, okay? The way you're gonna do that, it's very simple. You're gonna basically pick the tire up, you're gonna bring it over to an air compressor. Hopefully you have one at home. You're gonna wanna bring that soapy bottle of water with you no matter where you go though. You're gonna wanna spray the inner bead of the tire and the wheel with that soapy water. Get it nice and soapy, okay? It'll just help that inner bead slide into place, and then air up your tire, okay? Sometimes as that inner bead pops into place, it'll make a little bit of a popping noise. It's not dangerous. I found that depending upon the tire and depending upon the amount of soapy water, sometimes it slips into place and you don't even realize it. So monitor your PSI, make sure that that's going into place, keep it lubricated, keep your fingers out of there, make sure you don't have any little kids near you that are sticking their fingers in there, right? If you're getting help from a young one who's doing it for you on the back side of the tire, make sure they understand that you're gonna maybe hear a popping noise and they don't want their fingers in there, right? There's no easy way to get that inner bead off. That would be disastrous. So anyway, guys, there you have it, okay? Again, please definitely like, subscribe, share the video. There's a lot more stuff coming. We got a couple more builds and new video series coming out unedited and off camber, all right? You're gonna wanna check that out too. All right, guys, that's it. Go mount some beadlocks.